Hi everybody, thank you so much for joining me. My name is Keith Brooks, and today the letter P stands for the piping peeping frog, also known as the how could something so fucking cute be so understudied. First of all, I look like a Mortal Kombat character because I accidentally wore a green shirt, so I'm trying to keep this shit sort of not blending, So that's why I look like I'm gonna brutality you at any second. And as the also known as might indicate, this episode's gonna be really short because no matter how much I researched in English or Spanish, this animal doesn't have a lot of information about him. The piping peeping frog is an endemic amphibian located in Mexico. From the Sierra de Michoacán to Oaxaca to Sierra del Madre del Sur, all the way to Guerrero, Mexico, this 1-inch long frog, also known as the Oaxaca trill frog, is the tiniest, cutest little Kermit you're ever going to meet. Its name, the piping peeping frog, sort of refers to a couple of actions that the frog does, as does the Oaxacan trill frog. A piping frog is a frog that emits a long pipe-like sound, like a pitch pipe, like a boo, but they're normally really high pitch, like beep, like that sort of thing. A peeping frog is a frog that peeps, like beep, 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 like that. Sort of like a coqui frog might be classified as a peeping frog. A trill frog is a frog that sounds like it's rolling its R's, like brr, 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 like that. So the piping peeping frog, also known as the Oaxaca trill frog, does all three. It just squeaks high-pitched, cute little noises all the fucking time. Now, peeping frogs are often referred to as peepers in the United States of America, tending to be a light brown with a demarcated X on the back. However, this guy does not carry the same characteristics. I've only been able to find them in like a darkish brown, and sometimes you'll see the X as a ghost stripe feature, but it's not always present. They tend to inhabit tropical and subtropical woodlands that tend to stay in the moist areas, normally coming out during rainy seasons. From the Pacific coast into central Mexico, that seems like a large area, but it is a narrow strip of land that they occupy. And this is one of the reasons that we know so little about them, because that same strip of land is constantly under development. So one of the things that makes this animal endangered is loss of habitat, a sad story that we keep hearing repeated with many of these animals. One of the other things that's so interesting doing this research is these other life forms exist on our planet, and we occupy a time and space where knowledge is constantly at our fingertips, thanks to the internet. I know the internet can have some negative qualities, but the fact that we can learn so much is a beneficial thing, yet so much information has not yet been archived onto the internet and isn't being shared. And perhaps that's because not enough people are interested in it, but just hearing the idea that there exists such a cute little 1-inch creature that makes all of the cute sounds you could possibly imagine baffles my mind how people wouldn't want to hear about this guy every single day of their lives. And I hope you've enjoyed hearing about him today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Day 51 of 100 Days of the Animal Kingdom. Bye, everybody. Hi everybody, thank you so much for joining. My name is Keith Brooks, and today the letter Q stands for the quokka, also known as the happiest animal on Earth, or the Medea of the animal kingdom. And we're not talking about the Tyler Perry version. The quokka is a macropod, which is a family of marsupials that includes the kangaroo and wallaby, found exclusively within Australia. At one point in time, the animal roamed freely across the island continent, but now is exclusively in southwestern Australia, and particularly off two islands off the southwest coast. Ness, which is near Perth, and Bald Island, which is near Albany. Roughly the size of a domestic house cat, these animals weigh roughly 11 pounds, about 36 inches long with about a 12-inch tail, which is really short for a marsupial. They have strong hind legs, and their tails have fatty deposits, which whenever there is a shortage of food, they can get nutrients from. Nocturnal creatures, they are herbivores that, though originally evolved to walk on all fours and still do, have since adapted to be arboreal locomotors, meaning they can climb up trees, but only to a certain height. They get to about 5'11". They're like, no, too far for me, mate. I'm gonna crawl back down now, mate. Cute. That's my cute quokka voice. However, like some of their relatives, particularly the kangaroo, they are also known for leaping around on exclusively their hind legs. Because of the skeletal structure within their face, it often looks like they're smiling, which is why they get the name. But I like to think they are still smiling, right? These guys in recent years have taken the internet by storm with quokka selfies, mostly being taken on Rottnest Island by celebrities like Chris Hemsworth and Margot Robbie. Living for about 10 years during the daylight, they like to stake out in this plant called Acanthoparus brooksii, something like that. It has a bunch of spikies on it that protect them from any sort of predator. They have a promiscuous mating system, meaning they aren't monogamous, and they will find new mates every year, oftentimes multiple mates within a singular year. The gestation period is only 30 days, at which point the mother quokka gives birth to a hairless joey. That's what they're called. The joey will then live in the pouch of the mother quokka for about 6 months, moving out at that point but still feeding off the mother's milk for about 2 more months before it is completely an independent animal. Female quokkas can have 2 babies a year and generally have about 17 joeys throughout their entire life. Now, at the beginning of the episode, I made a joke about Medea, the Grecian tragedy. Here's where that comes into play. If a quokka is being pursued by a predator and it has a child with it, it will often take that child out of the pouch and yeet it at the predator. The baby's cries will then lure the predator, distracting it from pursuing the adult quokka. Is a horrible thing, admittedly, but it does give the female quokka the chance to keep replenishing the species. Because the working theory about quokka reproduction is that when a baby is conceived, a second one is conceived as well that is sort of a backup child, held in a gestational period just in case this first one doesn't work out, which I know is really weird, but that's kind of how they reproduce. On mainland Australia, they have to deal with all sorts of predators. When it comes to Rottnest, the predators are actually snakes and humans, but that latter probably not in the way you think it is. Because of our domestication of animals and our own habits, we think that all animals drink water, when that's not really how it works. My dogs, my rabbit, my cats, they all have a water bowl with fresh water anytime they need it. But in the wild, the vast majority of animals get their water from the food they eat, and the quokka is no different. Most wildlife animals will go months to a year without ever drinking any water of any sort, instead getting hydration from leaves and plants. Because the hydration required is a balance based on what food they intake. Yet, when people go to tourist attractions to see these animals, they will often feed them human snacks. One of the dangerous aspects of this is that the vast majority of human snacks have a high level of sodium, even sweets or vegetables that have been cooked, like corn. That salt intake is potentially toxic to these animals because their body doesn't have enough hydration to accommodate for it, and they don't drink the same way that humans do. So even giving a quokka a singular potato chip has the ability to kill the animal. Quokkas are also vectors for diseases, so oftentimes when you're venturing to these places, they tell you to kindly stay away from the animals unless they approach you, but under no circumstances feed the animal anything. Animals are curious and they'll take whatever you give to them, but the understanding of how their nutrients balance out and what their specific intakes are required to be thrown off with a simple Lay's chip. The name quokka comes from the Noongar, which is an Aboriginal language word, guaga. But now, in the Noongar language, they are referred to as bongoop. In the 1600s, a bunch of Dutch explorers kept seeing these animals. One thought it was an oversized cat, and in 1690 specifically, another one saw them on an island and began to call that island Thailand Rutenest, in Dutch, meaning the Rat Nest Island. Over the years, that was abbreviated to Rottnest Island, which is where we get the name now. However, again, they are not rodents, they are not large rats, but they are marsupials. But similar to some rodents, quokka do like to create little burrows and pathways through dirt and grass to help them get along easier. And probably my favorite fact about quokkas is how they sleep. This guy's had a long day of quokkaing around. He'll take his head and he'll put it on his feet upside down, just take a naparoni and cheese to, reset himself. And I think it's fucking adorable. And so are you, man. You're adorable. Thank you so much for tuning in. Day 52 of 100 Days of the Animal Kingdom. Bye, everybody. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Keith Brooks, and today the letter R stands for the road guard, also known as the most intense highway patrolman you'll ever meet. Excuse me, sir. Can I see your license and registration? That's really hard to do. To do the snake voice in top of the speech impediment. Plus, they live in Central America, so there would be a Spanish accent on top of that. So the road guard is a striped snake located from Mexico all the way through Central America into South America. However, despite that range, there's little information I can find out about this guy. They can get at their maximum about 1.3 meters in length. They are a distinct snake, noted for the stripes across their back that kind of look like the midlines in a road. They live in semi-arid areas, and some sources will say that they are diurnal, and some will say they are crepuscular, meaning they are most active at dawn and dusk. They have a distinct head from their neck, round pupils. They are oviparous animals and mainly feed on small reptiles, small birds, small snakes, and sometimes small mammals. But the discrepancy about whether they are crepuscular or diurnal isn't the only discrepancy you would find. Mexico says that they are venomous. Argentina says that they are non-venomous. Colombia says that they never bite anybody. American studies say they are semi-venomous, which I don't even know what that fucking means. So I can't even tell you if this snake bite is deadly or not. That's how little these guys are studied. In addition to that, there is a huge complication in the way this animal is named. Because that idea of road guard, that stays the same because of those distinct lines across the back. But there are so many names out there that, and some of them report to be the same species and some of them report to be the subspecies. They include the road guard, the road garter, the lined road garter, the peninsular road garter, Dunn's road garter, the beautiful road garter, the striped road garter, Garda camina de Linea, Garda camina de Peninsular, Sulucan, Garda de Camina de Dunn. A lot of amazing names for this guy without a lot of info out there. And I'm sorry that this makes it a kind of short video today, but again, it goes to show us that there are so many aspects of this world that we have little information about, that people just haven't put the time and study into. It could be a kind of depressing thought that we don't know enough about this little guy, but it also gives us room for growth. It says that there is more work to be done in order to understand this world that we co-inhabit with this beautiful, maybe scary creature. Who knows? Thank you so much for tuning in. Day 53 of 100 Days of the Animal Kingdom. Bye, everybody. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Keith Brooks. Today, the letter S stands for the shark, also known as completely jawsome. The shark is a large family of elasmobranch fish, all characterized by cartilaginous skeletons, meaning they don't have skeletons made of regular bone, but something sort of like cartilage. Now, these animals are at least 400 million years old. The whale shark being the largest of all sharks at 40 feet long, weighing 11 tons, while the dwarf lantern shark is the smallest at 6 inches long. Sharks are found in every sea on the planet, while the bull shark and the river shark can swim in both saltwater and freshwater. There are over 500 different species of sharks. A vast majority of them are known as the apex predators of their area, meaning they are the top of the food chain. However, that hasn't stopped humans from poaching and hunting these animals down. In the last 30 years, shark numbers have decreased across all species by 71%. 3/4 of every species of shark is listed as critically endangered. In fact, within the kingdoms of the wild, the apex predator not only occupies the space as the #1 hunter, but it keeps out invasive species that will then damage the rest of the ecosystems. So in places like the Caribbean, where sharks have been hunted to near extinction, we have now seen the influx of other animals like the lionfish, which has completely thrown off that ecosystem. For a long time, sharks were actually referred to as sea dogs, and you could still sort of see that in some of the names of different shark species, like the dogfish or the poor beagle. But the term shark actually comes from a Dutch word, schurk, which was used to describe somebody that took advantage of someone else, like a pool shark or a card shark, and the animal is named after that. First, you have the ground sharks, which includes the blue shark, the tiger shark, the bull shark, the hound shark, shark, the cat shark, and the hammerhead shark. They are noted by a long snout and nictitating membranes over their eyes that close to protect their eyes during an attack. Then we have the bullheaded or horn sharks. Then we have the hexancoformes, which include the cow shark or the frilled shark, which sort of resemble a marine snake. Then you have the mackerel shark, which includes the goblin shark, the great white shark, the basking shark. Megalodon would have been in here. They are characterized by their overly large jaws and their ovoviviparous reproduction system. Then you have carpet sharks, which include the zebra shark, the nurse shark, the whale shark, the wobbegong. You have the saw sharks, which have an elongated toothed snout that they use for slicing prey. And then you have the squaliforms, which includes the dogfish and the rough shark. Then you have angel sharks, which are sort of like flattened out to resemble some of their cousins, like the stingrays and the skates. And echinorenniforms, which are like the bristle shark and the bramble shark. So the teeth of shark, as opposed to being fixed to the jaw like ours are just fixed to the gum, so they can flow in and out. Now, most sharks will have a tooth replacement system that operates similar to a conveyor belt. It's estimated that some sharks will go through 30,000 teeth in their lives. The cookie cutter shark will replace all of its teeth simultaneously, but that's because it kind of uses it a little bit differently. The cookie cutter shark will grab onto you and will twist, literally taking a cookie out of you. The tiger shark specifically has these coloration patterns that are actually only available when it's a juvenile, because that's the most important time for it to be able to hide. Either way, when shark dentricles actually break apart or are injured, they grow back and continue the same pattern that once was there. So if a stripe is interrupted by a cut, when it heals, the stripe will be intact again. Like most fish, sharks use their gills to take in oxygen. However, some sharks are something called obligate ram ventilators, which means that they constantly have to have motion going across their gills to put oxygen inside. It's because of this scientific fact that a myth was started that all sharks have to be moving at all times or else they will die. And that's not true. Not even all sharks are obligate ram ventilators, but for those that are, there is something to the idea that they constantly have to have motion around them in order to breathe. And for these sharks, if they want to take a nap, what they will do is they'll find an underwater current or an underwater stream, an underwater bubble, something like that, and kind of stick their heads in it. So most sharks are cold-blooded. Not really. The actual term is poikilothermic. Poikilothermic means that the internal temperature of the animal matches the external temperature of whatever's around it. So they will constantly be trying to acclimate to whatever their environment is. But some sharks are homeothermic, which means warm-blooded. Their body temperature is always higher than what's aside from them. These include the great white shark. When it comes to senses, sharks have humans beat on every single one of them, especially olfactory senses. Sharks can smell 1 of a millionth part of blood in seawater. More importantly than that, they can detect where that scent is coming from based on the milliseconds it takes for it to hit one nostril versus the other. Sharks possess an organ called the ampullae of Lorenzini. So everything on Earth emits an electrical field. Even the Earth itself emits an electrical field. Were we as humans able to be more receptive, we would be able to detect changes in those electrical fields. Sharks can. That's why often they'll know something's over there to the left without even looking at it, because they can feel the difference in the electrical or magnetic field that this animal's presence produces, which is crazy. They also have the same lateral line system that we've discussed with other fish, birds, and reptiles. A lot of sharks live to about 20 to 30 years, but the spiny dogfish lives about 100 years. The whale shark lives about 100 years. However, the Greenland shark lives for probably about 400 years. We currently have one that we know of that is 482 years old, making it the oldest living vertebrate we've ever heard of. Shark babies are called pups. The male shark will have a pair of organs called claspers, which is, it's a penis, but it's 2 of them. And I'm not going to explain to you what happens. You should know how this works before you come to my channel, because let's face it, I'm all about sex appeal. So sharks reproduce 4 different ways. It's either oviparious, viviparous, or ovoviviparous. One is eggs, one is live birth, and one is a combination of the two inside. And the 4th way is parthenogenesis. Some sharks have been known to reproduce asexually. Oviparious sharks, the ones who have the eggs, will actually deposit these eggs into like a membrane material and corkscrew it in between rocks. I don't know how they do that, but as a form of protection. This leather material is often referred to as a mermaid's purse. Contrary to popular belief, sharks don't always want to fight. So even great white sharks, when they see something coming their way that seems like it's threatening, they'll have one of 2 responses. If they don't know what it is, they do something called the bump, and almost all sharks do this. We talked about it with my rainbow sharks, where they'll just take their nose and fucking hit it to see what happens. What are you, man? And to see how it reacts before it engages in anything else. But they also do the threat display, and the threat display is literally, if you imagine I'm a shark, and here are my finny fins, I go like that, just to scare you away. And it's kind of ridiculous that they'll just wibble wobble really quickly to show you, hey, I mean business. We know that they exhibit senses of play, that sharks get the zoomies, that sharks play chase. Some sharks sleep swim, like sleepwalking, but they're sleep swimming, and these aren't even obligate ram ventilators. Because of an attack in New Jersey in 1916, because of the novel and then the film Jaws, both of which the writer Peter Benchley and the filmmaker Steven Spielberg are yearly donators to shark foundations because they're trying to undo the irreparable damage that they've done to this beautiful animal. People have this misconstrued notion that these animals are just lethal, vicious attackers. Average amount of shark attacks unprovoked to humans globally every year is 4. Yet there are programs all across the world dedicated to culling these monstrous creatures. I'm looking at you, Australia. Fishing companies all over the world have killed millions of sharks and continue to do so every year because no government will stand up to regulate. There's a delicacy called shark fin soup. We'll find a juvenile shark, they will take a hot razor and they'll cut the animal's fins off and throw it back in the water, acting as if that's some sort of mercy. But the problem is that shark can no longer move now. One of the reasons that fin soup became so popular is because there's misconception that sharks are immune from cancer and bacteria and diseases and Alzheimer's. None of that's true. And a twisted irony is shark fin contains a neurotoxin that potentially leads to diseases like ALS and Alzheimer's. Look, so many of these animals are endangered. If you find one that you're interested in, that really grabs at your heartstrings, go on the internet. Look for, preservation groups for the okapi or the iguana or the shark. Because I do think part of the job, if you are at the top of the totem pole, is to take care of everything else that's further down. Thank you so much for tuning in. Day 54 of 100 Days of the Animal Kingdom. Bye, everybody. Hi everybody, thank you so much for joining. My name is Keith Brooks, and today the letter T stands for the tarantula, also known as the I am not looking forward to looking up pictures for this episode. Look, I think spiders are super cool. I know that they're important. They don't scare me. I just don't like them. Like, I'm just not the biggest of fans of. I think they scare me. Like, they don't. I'm not angry when I see them. Not enough where you should call me J. Jonah Jameson. But it's just like, I respect you being over there, buddy. I'm gonna be over here. And there's nothing worse than walking through a spider web. But that's not gonna happen with these guys. And if it does, you done fucked up big time. So tarantulas are a family of spiders found within the genus Theraphossidae. They're known as generally hairy little spider guys that can range anywhere from 2 inches to 4 inches with a leg span of anywhere from 3 to 12 inches. The way we determine leg span within a spider is by taking their back leg fully extended to the tip of it and then going to their front leg on the other side of their body fully extended. So you can get a foot length with that for some tarantulas, but those are the biggest tarantulas. Tarantulas are known for having very specific types of fangs that point downward as opposed to all other spiders, which sort of curve in. And their fangs can reach a maximum of 1.5 inches long. All tarantulas have venom, but no tarantula on Earth has venom potent enough to affect a human. Oftentimes you will hear about some deadly tarantula attack in South America or something. Every single one of those cases is a misidentification of what that spider is. Not all hairy spiders are tarantulas. In fact, the first spider to ever get the name tarantula was not a tarantula. The name itself, tarantula, derives itself from an Italian town, Taranto, where they found a spider. That spider being from there being called a tarantula. That was just a wolf spider. Other types of spiders, like the huntsman spider, are often misidentified as tarantulas because of the hair, also known as setae. Setae are the hair feelers you'll find on insects of all different types that are used as sensory organisms to help them determine what's going on. But tarantulas also have an interesting way of using these guys as well. Specimens from the New World, which is anywhere that is not Asia, Africa, or Europe, tend to have something called urticating hairs, which are the same sort of setae, except for they can kick them out of their body like a porcupine would. See, tarantulas don't really like to fight, so they'll often make a lot of displays to sort of stop a fight from having to happen. It starts with lifting their front legs to say booga booga booga. Then if that doesn't work, they sort of turn around and try to leave. If that doesn't work and they're from the New World, they can spit out these hairs, which can be extreme irritation to some animals, and if animals are small enough, can actually kill them. It's believed that all humans carry a slight allergy to these hairs, just as a sort of evolutionary protect ourselves, keep ourselves away from that. But if these hairs do get in your eyes or your nasal cavity, you could be in a lot of trouble. These hairs have been known to permanently blind people. Tarantulas, just like all spiders, are divided into two sections of their body, the prosoma and the opistoma, I think is the name of the latter part. So the prosoma is the front half, the opistoma is the back half. They have 4 legs on either side, 2 little army arms, some fangy fangs, and a mouth tucked in beneath the fangy fangs. On their butts, they have something called the spinneret, which is how they make spider webs. Now, when other spiders spin their silk to capture prey, tarantulas don't. The vast majority of tarantulas are burrowing animals, so they like to hide in dirt or in wood or something like that. And what's kind of fucked up is they will either line their burrow with these hairs that they have that can cause irritation to any animal that tries to sneak in after them, with the corpses of the dead that they've slaughtered, generally bugs, or with the silk of their own web to enable them to get out quicker. In addition to that, the vast majority of tarantulas develop a tripwire system, a large connection of webs that goes into their burrow that has a wire outside, so that way if somebody hits it, the spider inside the burrow instantly knows something's amiss. Just in case the CIA is looking for them because of all the conspiracy theories they peddle on the worldwide web. Now, the largest of these guys is up for debate. It's either the Goliath bird eater, the salmon bird eater, or the pink-footed bird eater. Depending on the size of the tarantula changes what their diets are. The vast majority of them are eating off of smaller insects, but some tarantulas feed off of reptiles, amphibians, birds, and small mammals. Some tarantulas have even been known to eat fish. One of the complicated things about these guys is that their stomach is actually a tube that goes throughout their body, as opposed to something that has stomach acid like we do. And more so, they only have a sucker for a mouth, so they can only drink food. So when a tarantula kills something, it grabs it with its front 2 little army arms, and it will bite into it, scraping it apart, ejecting enzymes on it to melt it so that it then can suck everything up. With what it can't eat or break down, it sort of rolls it into a ball and throws it into a corner. So a male tarantula will use its spinneret to make a sort of web and then inject its sperm into the web. This is a gross show. Why do I do this to myself? That will attract the female. So they'll like do a dance or something like that. Then the tarantula will take its front arms, which also have a sexual organ on them, and it will dip it inside of the sperm web and then put that into the female tarantula. And then she's preggers. But then right after that, it leaves because it's like, oh shit, she's gonna bite me or eat me. Will then hatch eggs, depending on the species. It can be anywhere from 10 to 2,000 eggs. She creates a sort of like webbed nest for them and constantly is turning that nest to make sure that no malformities occur from the eggs being in one position for too long. Tarantulas can come in all sorts of colors, from black to blue to yellow stripes. It's just a varied species, especially with 1,100 different species species of tarantula on the earth. They have 2 sets of book lungs within them, which kind of look like books. Tarantulas don't have blood in the way we think of blood. Instead, they have a chemical protein that carries throughout their body, but not in cells. It's called hemolymph. Now, the way their bodies are designed, they have mobility around their joints at all times. But if they want to stretch out their legs, then they have to put more hemolymph into it, kind of like an erection. This is weird. Such a weird episode. But that takes me to another important part of this tarantula biology. Any damage to a tarantula is potentially life-threatening because their blood doesn't operate the same way that ours does, and more or less functions like like gasoline. It's the fuel to keep them going as opposed to carrying oxygen throughout their body. If you cut a tarantula, it could easily die. One of the ways that it repairs that and maybe replaces hairs that it shoots out is by a process called molting. This happens more often as the insect is young, but this is a replacement of the entire exoskeleton, including those hairs. However, female tarantulas live for about 30 years. Male tarantulas only live for about 10, and this is the sad reasoning why. Once they are fully sexually mature animals, they probably only have 1 molt left in them, and generally that's the molt that will kill them. So as they get older, the sexual organs that are located in their little grabbers become more engulfed. When they start to molt, the skin can't get over that. So they're left in a vulnerable state, unable to complete the molting process, and tend to pass away shortly after that. 95% of the tarantulas you see on TV shows or in pet trade are all female. You will more often see male tarantulas in the wild because they have come out of the burrow to look for a mate, because they know death is near. And boy, doesn't it describe my dating profile to a T? Tarantulas don't have the best of eyesight, really only being able to determine movement and light and darkness, but it's said that tarantulas that are arboreal, living in trees, have better eyesight than those that are terrestrial, burrowing into the earth. This animal has been with us for a long time. The oldest fossil that we can tell are definitely tarantulas, date back to 16 million years ago. But there are some fossils that we think might be tarantulas, and those are over 75 million years. And also, much like the shark, the negative mythos that's sort of developed around it, and mostly in an unjust way. There are animals and spiders out there that do have potent bites, like the banana spider, but the banana spider is not a tarantula. And like, I straight up thought they murdered people for fun. Like, that's the cool thing about doing something like this, is I'm going into it to inform people, to give myself like a challenge of editing and research, but also I'm learning new things constantly, and I love that. I love that feeling. I'm such a nerd. I feel like I belong in the Big Bang Theory, because I always want to, like, every time I'm talking to somebody, I'm like, did you know that quokkas do this? Like, and what a weird... Man, I understand why I'm single. Now that I say it out loud. Thank you so much for joining and tuning in for another day of 55 of 100 Days of Animals. Fuck, I messed it up. Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining. My name is Keith Brooks, and today the letter U stands for the umbrella bird, also known as a thank you. Oh, thank you very much, Squeak Squeak, the Elvis Presley of the bird kingdom. That's what that is. So the umbrella bird are 3 species of bird found within Central and South America. They are named after their cool little pompadour hair that they have, and were first described by Sir Alfred Wallace, who was a companion of Charles Darwin back in the 1800s. This was prior to Elvis Presley, so that's why they're not called the Elvis bird, because they look like fucking Elvis. Now, they occupy Central and South American rainforests, but their biggest predators are monkeys, snakes, and humans invading their habitat. 2 of the 3 different species of this bird are listed as critically endangered just from loss of habitat alone. They're about 19 inches in length. They're the largest of the Cotinga bird family, and the Amazonian umbrella bird is the largest of the passerines in South America. They generally have a wingspan of about 28 inches and weigh about 1.5 pounds. Now, because they're big for like a sparrow, they can fly, but they're not really great at it. And instead, they just jump around. That's their sort of movement. In fact, these birds do migrate in winter winter, but it's by jumping down a mountain or back up a mountain instead of flying anywhere. Their winter and summer trips are more staycations than anything else. Now, these guys live about 16 years in the wild, but one of the most discernible features they have is this Scott Ian like goatee thing that they have. That's actually called a wattle, and it's an inflatable resonator that these birds possess. They can grow up to 14 inches in length, especially within the long wattled umbrella bird, which is one of the species. And then there's the bare-throated umbrella bird, in which case it's just red skin and you don't see the black plumage across it. Will fill the wattle up with air, so that way when they decide to make their piping sound, it resonates, said to sound like a hippo or a deep piping noise from a musician. Their indigenous name is the Weramimbe, which just means piping bird. They are diurnal creatures, feeding during the day and nesting at night. So they feed basically on fruits, insects, and vertebrates, small vertebrates like lizards. But because they spend the vast majority of their time in treetops, the fruit that they eat, they discard the seeds or they'll poop out the seeds, thus planting more plants and making them a crucial part of the ecosystem there. When they nest at night, they curl up really tight, so they look like just an assortment of black feathers. Think about in House Moving Castle when she goes to see him and he's fully changed into the bird thing. You can't see any of his features. He's just floof. That's what these guys look like when they sleep. So the unmatched males will associate in something called leks, L-E-K-S. Now, leks in most animals are a group of bachelors that sort of sing out to try to call a mate in and impress them with the sound of their calls. So think about, like, I don't know, grew up in a small town in Georgia. So outside the Piggly Wiggly on a Friday night, how we rev up our trucks. That's us being in leks, I suppose. So the female looks a lot like the male, just a little bit smaller of a crown, and she's in charge of building the nest, which happens in a tree a little bit away from the ground so the predators can't get it, but not too far up so that when the birds first are learning how to jump, they don't risk falling and breaking their fucking everythings, you know? It's a month-long incubation process, and then the birds will be fledglings for the next 6 to 10 weeks. The female serves as the sole parent during this time period, the male going back to hang out with the boys and the leks and crack open a couple cold ones. So the three species of this animal are the Amazonian umbrella bird, the long-wattled umbrella bird, and the bare-necked umbrella bird. This thing looks like an animal from Foster's Home for Imaginary Pets or whatever the fuck it was. That's what this guy looks like. He belongs on. It's a crazy, cool-looking, interesting animal that needs to learn to be a better dad, but it's absolutely beautiful. One of the things I love about this doing this is it challenges me to, you know, constantly be editing, constantly be researching, but just to learn more stuff. It's so much fun just to find things you never knew, to paraphrase Pocahontas. Thank you so much for joining me for day 50, I think 6 of 100 days of the animal kingdom. Bye, everybody. Hi, everybody. My name is Keith Brooks. Thank you so much for joining. Today, the letter V stands for the Van Dyke salamander, also known as the salamander that when he walks into his house, he trips over the ottoman and then, like, his tail catches him and everybody laughs. That's what this guy's known as. It's not really. The Van Dyke salamander is an American lungless salamander, meaning it breathes through its skin. Relative to other salamanders, it's considered kind of short and stocky, getting to be about 10 centimeters long. It's only found in Washington state in 3 distinct populations. Originally discovered in 1906, it's named after its collector, not its discoverer, a guy named Edwin Cooper Van Dyke. Not Dick Van Dyke, but that would have been cool too. But I'm sure there's probably an animal named after him. There's like a bunch named after Harrison Ford. For a long time, the Larch Mountain salamander and the Coeur d'Alene salamander and this guy were thought to all be the same species, but in recent years, genetic testing has proven that they are distinct enough to be classified as separate animals. Normally found in streams, seepage, or rock outlets, they have a parotid gland behind their eye. Now, a lot of different animals have this, mostly like frogs and other amphibians, but they generally have it on like their, I don't know, their necks or something like that, but it releases a bufotoxin, which is a neurotoxin that helps them prevent being digested by animals. So in this case, this guy cries toxins for you. Like, that's it, as it's saying, please don't eat me, it's crying poison. That's kind of insane. Now, their coloration can vary and is often described by phases. They can either be dark black, yellow, or pink, described as dark phases, light phases, and rose phases. phases. In addition to that, they'll have a stripe that generally will have like a speckling on the side of it, tends to be like dots on the side, or they'll have speckling on their undercarriage, or on their throat will be a distinct color. Multiple phases can be found within that same population, like phase 1, 2, and 3, they fight Thanos. These guys are only present in the Olympic Peninsula, the Willapa Hills, and the Cascade Range. Those are the only areas in the world that we've ever been able to actually find them. They are highly terrestrial creatures, but need a high level of moisture within their soil and need a cool temperature to survive. They're most active in spring when the snow has begun to melt, and at the beginning of fall when the rainy season is starting. In order to avoid the harsh temperatures of summer or the freezing temperatures of winter, they will often seek shelter beneath rocks or in rotting logs. Now, when it comes to mating, they will have a clutch of eggs, anywhere from 5 to 15, and the female will tend to all of the needs of the eggs. There is no larval stage for these salamanders. Instead, when born, they look just like their mommy and daddy, but a little bit tinier. But an interesting thing to note here is, though this animal has been in our consciousness since 1906, we've only ever found 6 nests of their eggs ever in all of history. It's over 100 years. That's crazy. And because of those isolated pockets and the limited numbers and limited observations we have of them, we don't really understand the entirety of their courtship rituals, but we do know that large decaying conifer logs tend to be important in their breeding process. We also know that the juveniles look exactly like the adults, except for they are always in dark phase with either a yellow or a red dorsal stripe. We've spoken about lungless salamanders before, but if you're ever wondering if the salamander you found is a lungless salamander or not, a good way to indicate that is by looking at their face and seeing if they have nasolabial grooves. These are just indentations that go from the nose to the mouth. Lungless salamanders will have these to help them get more oxygen and get more senses in, whereas regular salamanders do not have these. Van Dyke salamander are the coolest of all adapted salamanders in Western North America. This means they wear sunglasses and do sick kickflips on their skateboards. That's not what that means. What it actually means is they require a temperature cooler than any other salamander found within that part of the world. But again, there is a boiling point where they can't go past. If it's too cold, they will freeze. But more importantly than just freezing, whereas we've discussed with some lizards who can freeze and still be alive, like the iguana, the outside of a lungless salamander freezes, it ceases to breathe because it does not have lungs. Again, if the temperature gets into any extreme weather, too hot or too cold, they will dig down beneath the rocks or even into the earth, where it is in the summer cooler or in the winter warmer. It was believed for a long time that the different color phases were based on the isolation, almost as if tribal breakdowns. But since then, with more research, we found that those color phases happen in every single one of the populations, and there's a mixture of them. So we don't really know what the coloration means. One of the working theories right now is something about the temperature when they are in the egg form. With certain animals like the turtle or the diamondback terrapin, as we've discussed earlier, the temperature of the egg before it hatches, the surrounding environment of it, can often determine what the sex of that animal will be. Theoretically, the same could apply for coloration. We just don't know. More research needs to be done, which means there's a whole lot more things we can learn about this super cool animal. Thank you so much for all that you do. Day 57 of 100 Days of the Animal Kingdom. Bye, everybody. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Keith Brooks, and today the letter B stands for the betta fish, also known as the Tony Jaa of the fresh water. Now, betta is actually a genus of fish out there in the world native to Southeast Asia. We're talking Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, Myanmar, Malaysia, all of that region. There are over 73 species that are found within betta fish. But however, when most people refer to betta, they're talking about the betta splendens, also known as the Siamese fighting fish. Now, these animals have been domesticated for about 1,000 years, which is longer than any other fish in the world. They are the second most popular domesticated fish in the world, only after goldfish, and we're all saying their names wrong. Now, while there are 73 different varieties of beta, when most people think of a beta, they think of something that looks like this specifically. And any other type of exotic fin or coloration, they all belong to the same species. But rather than it, the popular belief that they're named after the Greek letter of the alphabet, beta, they're actually named betta, B-E-T-T-A. And this comes from a Malay phrase, ikan beta, meaning fish warrior. In Thai, the name of the fish is the plakat, which just means biting fish. Now, both of these names sort of indicate that this fish has a level of aggression. However, it's important to note that two different distinct branches of this same species exist: the wild version of it and the domesticated version of it. The wild version is not aggressive. It's only the domesticated version that is aggressive. And this came from selective breeding over 1,000 years, specifically for something called fish fighting, where two males of the species were put in the same tank and then they would fight one another. However, in Thailand, those fights would never result in death. They were always stopped before they got to that point. Or naturally, what would happen, the fish would fight and then one fish would be submissive and the other one would be declared the winner. As barbaric as this is, as long as the fish were kept in good health afterwards, any damage done to their fins or scales would repair themselves because bettas have really great immune systems, thus also one of the reasons making them more popular in the aquarium trade. They really became popular worldwide in the early 1800s when King Rama of Siam, now Thailand, began royal games of fighting fish. Now, it's from this region and this time period that we get the name Siamese fighting fish. King Rama would later gift them to a Dutch zoologist who would later send them all across the world. Growing anywhere from 2 to 3.5 inches, in the wild, betta fish are actually dull in their color with short fins. They inhabit marshes, they inhabit swamplands and paddies. But because of the contamination that often happens with soil disruption in that water and different insects trying to feed on that water, the betta developed an interesting evolution and developed something called the labyrinth organ that allows them to breathe air. Both in the wild and domesticated, betta fish love to inhabit areas with a lot of aquatic vegetation. This allows them a chance to hide from any sort of predators, but in addition to that, it provides different nutrients and oxygen that their water, not always the best of qualities, might need. They are carnivorous animals. They eat small insects, they eat crustaceans, but contrary to a lot of myths, betta cannot survive exclusively on the roots of plants. That's like asking a lion to survive on salad. It's not what they eat. In the domesticated world, though, what happened was people kept breeding betta for more aggression and more color variation and fin variation. So it's only in the domesticated version of this animal that we see all that vibrancy of color. In the wild, that animal will only show the vibrancy of color whenever it has an emotional reaction to something or it's trying to attract a mate. You see, just the way that our musculature has layer upon layer, and our epidermis as well, tons of layers compact together whose only foe is paper. The betta have a similar thing with their scales, each layer being a different color, allowing it to showcase different colors. If the female betta is interested, she will present a different coloration in sort of a horizontal line called breeding bars to indicate that yes, let's do this thing. The male will then create a bubble nest, which normally utilizes something floating in the water and create all sorts of bubbles around it. So during their courtship, the male will often be a little aggressive, but playful aggressive towards the female, chasing them around, nipping at their fins, that sort of thing, but it's all consensual. When they actually breed, it's called the nuptial embrace, because what happens is the female will be this way and the male will wrap his body around her. She will start depositing eggs. I think it's 10 to 40 eggs at a time, and every time she does this, the male will release something called milt into the water. Milt is basically the fertilization liquids and stuff of a male fish. As she's releasing the eggs, the male will grab them with his mouth and put them in the bubble nest so they stay afloat. The female often will do this as well, but she's secretly eating them. So that's fucked up. After all the eggs are done and they're fertilized, the male will tend to chase the female away. The male will tend to the eggs from now on. Within 36 hours, these eggs are going to hatch and they will become fry, but these fry are completely dependent upon their gills, their labyrinth organ that that allows them to breathe air won't develop until later. In the 1920s, the eugenic experiments on breeding these animals with the desired outcome of specific aesthetics really took a ramp when a scientist found a way to breed something called the veil-tail variant. From that point on, it was all about figuring out what different styles of tails, fins, and coloration they could produce. But surprisingly enough, the vast majority of the harm done against these animals doesn't come from the farms where they are raised at, but instead from the United States of America and the Western world and how we handle selling them. There's a gross misunderstanding that betta fish don't require a lot of space. So oftentimes you will see them sold at stores in these little cups so small that they can't even stretch out their entire body and have to constantly be curved. Their aggression that we see displayed in them, that was bred into them, operates the same way that our aggression does. Now, our same release of endorphins and those chemical components that we have, betta fish have, but more complex. Now, their lifespan in good health, it's about 3 to 5 years. 98% of all betta you will see in a store are male. And it's because in the breeding process, the male tends to display the more articulated fins, the brighter colors. Now, contrary to a popular belief, the aggression aspect that has been bred into these animals is not solely in the male. Now, some betta will change color throughout their life, something known as marbling, which is a result of something called transposon, which is where in an organism, a gene can actually change its properties over time. And perhaps one of the reasons that they have such good immune systems. However, their immunities are compromised in colder temperatures. That's why if you have a betta, it's always suggested that you have a heater. Remember, they come from a tropical climate. Variations of their fins include the veil tail, the crown tail, the comb tail, the half moon, the over half moon, the rose tail, the feather tail, the placotte, the half moon placotte, the delta tail, super delta, half sun, elephant ear tail, and the spade tail. Not only are these guys great swimmers, but they're actually really good jumpers as well. Betta have been known to sleep upside down, to sleep on their side, and even to sleep out of the water. They really like hammocks, so they make this like leaf hammock for them. In addition to that, they also sleep with their eyes open. Partly, this is theorized to be developed as a defense mechanism because other fish don't want to eat a dead fish because they don't know what killed it, if it was a sickness. And I myself had a wonderful betta fish by the name of Muerte. I had him for about 4 years. He was a super good boy. Here's some pictures of him right now. And he was so fucking smart. He was so intelligent. We would play this game of chase where I would just take a wooden dowel rod and I would stick it in his tank and I would chase him with it. And he would be all about it. And then about halfway through the game, he would decide to chase it and follow it around. I would have conversations with him. I would sing songs with him. He would help me make dinner, all sorts of stuff. He was just a really good friend and I miss him dearly. It's how they produce emotions is so similar to ours that a lot of testing on SSRIs comes from experiments done with betta fish to see how it stabilizes their moods. And the tragedy is we took this beautiful animal that could feel and we forced it to become a fighting machine. It's just a bitter reminder of how we can fuck things up. If you have the space, if you have the home, if you have the love, go buy yourself at least a 5-gallon tank and save one of these betta in one of these pet stores. Thank you so much for tuning in to 58 of 100 Days of the Animal Kingdom. Bye, everybody. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Keith Brooks, and today the letter W stands for the wildebeest, also known as the unfortunate murderer of Mufasa. Wildebeest is a type of antelope found within southern and eastern Africa. It belongs to the family of Bovidae, which also includes things like sheep, cattle, deer, antelope, true antelope, and other even-toed hoofed ungulates and horned ungulates. The wildebeest, or the gnu, spelled G-N-U, belongs to both of these categories. Now, there are two different species of wildebeest. There's the black wildebeest and the blue wildebeest, and a couple of subspecies that we'll talk about a little bit later. From the fossil record, we believe that the black and the blue wildebeest split off about 1 million years ago, and it wasn't because of any territorial fights or anything. It's just that one decided to graze elsewhere, and because of that change in environment, it changed the species itself. Now, the best way to differentiate between the two of these is not only the coloration, but also the way the horns operate. Now, these animals are herbivores, and in the vast majority of the communities that they occupy, they are the biggest game out there. Often graze with zebra, and this does a couple of different things. One, it allows them to have a friend. Secondly, it increases an alertness about predators coming. So zebra have better hearing than the wildebeest does, so they can hear if a sound comes closer. But in addition to that, zebra prefer when grazing the top of the grass and the grass that grows a little bit taller, while the wildebeest prefers the grass that is closer to the ground and the more bitter of the roots. So I used to date this chick that liked cashews, and I liked all the other stuff from the mixed nuts. So it was a really good relationship, just based on that principle. And that's sort of what these guys have going. Prey of large cats and predators like lions and cheetah and hyena, the wildebeest has also learned to be able to detect the different calls that a baboon might give. Because baboons, they like to scream all the time. But some of the screams are for playfulness, and some of the screams are warnings that there's a predator coming. And the wildebeest has learned to differentiate between those different screams. Now, the name wildebeest comes from Dutch, wildebeest. Most people think it means wild beast. But if we actually play with the etymology of that, Afrikaans, a language derived from Dutch, beast means cattle, so the name is actually something closer to wild cow. In the Khoikhoi language, which is a native indigenous language there, the other form, nu, comes from the word nu, which is the name of the animal there. Between the black wildebeest and the blue wildebeest is the larger of the two. Height-wise, it's about 59 inches and weighs about 550 pounds. In all of the species, the males are bigger than the females, and they have larger forequarters than they do the hindquarters. They're noted for a mane, for their horns, something called a Roman nose, which I think is just insulting to Italian people. Black wildebeest is about 49 inches tall and weighing about 400 pounds. So the difference in the horns is that the blue wildebeest, the horns go out, then go downward, then curve up back towards the skull, whereas, oh, this is so hard to remember, the black wildebeest, they go out and then back up a little bit. So they go that, and they're just going forward. They're not coming back into the skull. I think that's the difference. The blue wildebeest can inhabit all sorts of areas, like woodlands, grassy savannas, all that sort of stuff. Where the black wildebeest tends to just inhabit grassland, open grassland areas. The blue wildebeest migrates every year, going about 1,000 miles in winter, while the black wildebeest does not. The black wildebeest has milk that is higher in protein and lower in fat, while the blue wildebeest doesn't have that. I mean, they do have milk, but it's just not, it's not as high in protein, and it has more fat in it. So it's like whole milk versus like muscle milk. That's what they have. The blue wildebeest is also known for having stripes. However, when their calves are born, they do not have their stripes at birth. They develop over time. Now, since these animals travel in herds, they have developed something called swarm intelligence. That means if there's a problem, they solve it together as one cohesive species. They do not have monogamous bonding. However, in ruts, which is what they call a mating season, they will temporarily create a territory that the male dominates in order to lure in the females. The vast majority of wildebeest all mate at the same time, and as they give birth following in the spring, in February and March, having had a gestational period of about 8.5 months, it's estimated that of all the wildebeests in the world, about 80% of them will give birth in the same exact week of every year, which is kind of insane. The calves are born, they weigh about 45 pounds and can walk within a couple of minutes. And since the juvenile or the calf wildebeest are the most vulnerable of all the species, susceptible to being picked off by predators, this is a huge part of their survival, and it is crucial for them to live, to be able to hit the ground and fucking start getting up. They've also developed interesting defense mechanisms that when the herd is sleeping, they will take turns on who stays awake to keep watch. And they are a species that is considered a national point of pride. The province of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa has them on the coat of arms, and South Africa themselves minted a 2-cent coin coin that has a dancing black wildebeest. Their hide is used for leather. Their meat is used for food. It can run about 50 miles per hour. Both males and females have horns, and the subspecies of the blue wildebeest are the Nyasaland wildebeest, Coxon's wildebeest, the eastern white-bearded wildebeest, and the western white-bearded wildebeest. They are active in the morning and the afternoon until it gets too hot, and all wildebeest like to nap at night. It said that 50% of their life is spent resting, 33% dedicated to grazing, and 12% is dedicated to playing with other wildebeest, because they like to play chase, which is awesome. These animals are what are known as a keystone species, meaning that the entire ecosystem is partially dependent upon these guys. A keystone is when you have an archway, that arch in the middle that holds all the pressure, that's the keystone. If you remove that, everything else tumbles. And that's sort of what the African ecosystem is dependent upon, is these guys. There are insects that are pollinators to African plants that feed off of the fecal matter left over by the wildebeest. The rest of the pollinators of African plants are birds that have the opportunity to graze for food and watering holes when the wildebeest are around, because the wildebeest give them a better cover. If you take away the wildebeest, all of the plant life goes away with it. Also, zebra and wildebeest are lawnmowers for the African savanna. They allow a renewal of growth to constantly be happening. One innocuous, benign animal species can be the thing that holds the entire world there together. That's what I find so interesting about doing all of this, and I hope you find it interesting as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. Day 59 of 100 Days of the Animal Kingdom. Bye, everybody. Hi, everybody. My name is Keith Brooks. Thank you so much for joining. And today, the letter X stands for the cirrus, also known as the squirrel that doesn't joke at all, because he's very, very serious. Get it? He's serious, like he's serious. He's a squirrel that doesn't. It's hard to come up with these. The cirrus, or the unstriped ground squirrel, is an African squirrel found within the tribe of Serene, which is a bunch of different ground squirrels. We'll talk about some of them. There's a striped version. This is not that guy. This is the unstriped version. They are found throughout Africa, from Ethiopia to Sudan to Tanzania to Djibouti. These guys are technically omnivores, eating seeds and plants, and also small insects. Some of them even being known to eat the eggs of birds. 8 inches in length from head to foot, and about 6 inches in length with their tail. Their tail is distinctly flat. The squirrel has this tawny brownish color, notably missing a stripe, but all of the other members of the Serene tribe do have stripes. They have a white, like, guy liner around their eyes, and their vibrissae, which are their whiskers, the whiskers of mammals that are used to detect their surrounding environment and to keep their balance, just like a cat has, tends to be smaller, as well as their brains tend to be smaller than other arboreal squirrels, but are comparable to that of other terrestrial squirrels. Similar to the North American prairie dog, they have burrowing systems where each squirrel or family of squirrels will have their own burrow that is their home, but they all connect to other burrows. Within this regard, they are not territorial, though there is a hierarchy, with males being more dominant than females and younger squirrels, also known as pups. They show their dominance by either vocalizations or like nuck if you buck, sort of like thrust sort of attitude. That being said, they're actually very friendly squirrels, so in the area that they're occupying, they can be preyed upon by jackals, hyenas, snakes, all sorts of stuff like that, but other squirrels and other animals will also be preyed upon by those animals. So these burrows are often used as a refuge for any other animal, and the Zara squirrels are totally fine with it. Like, yeah, come on in, homie, let's chill until the threat goes away. That's totally fine. So they'll often share their burrows with mongooses, and in exchange, mongooses will keep snakes out of there. So it's this cool little domestic world that they have going on. And some people actually domesticate these guys, and when they have them as pets, they roam free like a cat would. Other members of this tribe include the striped ground squirrel, the Cape ground squirrel, the mountain ground squirrel, the Barbary ground squirrel, and the long-clawed ground squirrel. Gestational period for the babies is about 48 days, and 52 days after that, the young will be fully weaned off. Xeris have like a cool little pouch in their cheek that helps them store food, but one of the thing, like other squirrels, they store food. Now, for a long time, we didn't believe that they actually did this. There was no scientific evidence to support it. But now we find that they do store food. They just often forget where they store the food at. And because of this, they become one of the most beneficial creatures to the ecosystem in their area. Because they forget where they store seeds, those seeds wind up growing into plants, which is like the best side effect of ADHD ever. Because sometimes they live in those communal sort of burrow areas. Sometimes a group of male squirrels will get together and they form what's called a band. So it's like 19 to 20 dudes just like hanging out and chilling all the time, which I think is what, I think that's a ska band in humans is what that's called. Now their litter sizes tend to be 1 to 3 pups with the ability to breed year round. One of the sad facts about these guys, and we really don't know why, is that the Xerus has one of the highest litter loss rates in all of the animal kingdom. 70% of their litters are lost. And this doesn't mean captured by a predator, this means stillborn animals. And scientists don't really understand why this tends to be the case, but more research needs to be done about these animals, obviously. Also known as Joffrey's ground squirrel, they like to eat while standing up, making them appear to be like meerkats. But what this actually does is twofold. Allows them to see more in their environment and detect if any predators are coming, but it also helps with digestion. Now, the old wives' tale in Africa is that you can tell the mood of a squirrel depending on how its tail is looking, and a lot of different variations depending on the species. There is a good chance that there is truth in that wives' tale, we just don't know yet. Not enough research has been done into these animals. An even more interesting possibility is that we know these squirrels communicate with other squirrels through vocalizations like chirps or barks. However, they also communicate through pheromones. They have scent glands in their faces to release a scent to mark their territory, to display emotions and anger and all of that sort of stuff. Potentially, their tails are also a form of communication that they use with other animals, or like in canines, an extension of how their emotional state is. It's only through more observation and study that we'll find the answers to this, but I'm super excited to find out what the results are. And I hope you are too. Thank you so much for joining me. Day 60 of 100 Days of the Animal Kingdom. Bye, everybody.